Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm doing a 25.12 support tier list, server job content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of mostly MSI focused changes this patch. We saw a nerf towards the likes of Nico. We also saw buffs towards Bard, LeBlanc, Nidalee got a buff. Obviously, in the case of LeBlanc and Nidalee, they were mostly focused towards jungle and mid lane, but they are seeing some level of play and support. And honestly, I think LeBlanc as an unironic flex pick, and maybe even Nidalee to an extent, should be considered. So I do actually just recommend testing these picks. Other than that, some other things shifting around. We saw nerfs towards the likes of Senna for ADC, Shen for his top lane strength, and yeah, those are the main things to talk about, so let's get into it. To begin with, the detail is going to lead off with Twitch. Champion, even with the 5% AP ratio buff on the E, just isn't anywhere near being viable in the support role. It mostly just functions as a cheese pick, and unless you become incredibly accelerated within the game, you are just outvalued by other options. MF just hasn't been supported in the support role for such a long period of time. She needs just better AP ratios to function here. Her dot build just isn't good enough to really be standalone. She doesn't provide enough utility to kind of compete with some of the other options as well. If the E maybe had a more aggressive AP ratio on either its damage or its slow, might be room for it. So maybe right long term, do something about this pick, but for the moment, definitely in a very weak spot. Malphite actually doesn't lose as many games as I feel like he would be perceived to lose in the support role. Like, he actually has like a 48% win rate close to, which is really insane because this pick just doesn't really have that level of like, it's just perceived as not really being a functional support option. I don't think it's good by any means. Like, I'm not suggesting that you should play Malphite support, but it's just interesting to see some of these picks which like aren't really like even slightly supported within this role and have some, just some performant games. Like, they can win games. So Malphite pick I don't really recommend. Obviously, it's played mostly as like a gimmick pick alongside Yasuo, so maybe some of its win rate increase can be attributed to Yasuo being in a pretty strong spot at the moment. But Malphite, yeah, sits within the D tier. You play him as like a harass champion in the support role, like mostly like Malignant into Storm Surge. I believe the second most common built item on like first slot is 4 mil Rush, which isn't very good, so yeah, don't really recommend this pick. Veigar is obviously akin to Malphite, just paired alongside Ziggs. You play the bounce into the cage. He's not very good as a support. His only real tool is his cage. He doesn't really ramp up to ever really be a huge damage threat. If you opt into damage, then yeah, you can close some of that back, but then you're usually quite squishy. You don't quite have the gold to really provide much else, and it's just a pick I wouldn't really recommend. Ashe is one of the more viable D tier options. I think if you're very, very good at piloting the pick and very good at pushing early advantages, well, there's like a legitimate spot for it. For solo queue, though, it's just not a pick I recommend. It's very, very elite skewed. Even back when she was a strong support option, it was also very elite skewed. Was just not very performant within the role. But unless like I don't know, Mandate gets buffed and maybe Ashe had some support skew changes, I just don't really see it coming back. It's just a pick I don't really recommend. And then Set. It's not very popular. It's actually quite like it's like the least popular pick within the tier list here. I don't really recommend it. I think there are better options which are either less gold hungry, provide more utility, but there is an argument that it is a flex option. There are some builds floating around, like we've seen like Warmog's rush set supports, we've seen like Deadman's Rush, Trailblazer Rush. There's different things being played around with. I don't recommend it as a pick, but maybe if you find a comfortable build you want to go, you know what matchup you want to take it into, there could be spots and spaces for it if you also just utilize it as a flex option. Moving on to the C tier then, these picks, some of them I think can conditionally be picked. Like I'd only say Set and Ashe maybe from the D tier options if you're like very good at piloting them and you know the spots you want to pick them. I mean, it's just very easy to play. It's the main selling point of the champion, the fact that he has pretty good CC and like good lockdown and his ease of play. He doesn't have good itemization. He's a bit gold hungry in his current state, and he's not in one of his strongest states either. Like Amumu jungle is fine at the moment. Like it's good for low elo, not great in high at the moment. So not a pick I recommend, but is there as an option and is a C tier option through being quite easy to pilot. Gragas sits within the C tier. He's actually become a bit more popular. I can't even see him here. I don't actually. There we go. Okay, so Gragas, he's actually seen some competitive, I believe, like as a like an answer to some of the like Alistar priority which people have been opting into. Don't think Gragas support's amazing. I think there are better options, especially within solo queue. Like when it comes to solo queue, it's going to be less selective in what you're playing a champion into, and you kind of want it into like an archetype. It's what like Borm is good into hook champions, for example, and like melees. Gragas primarily just wants to be played into Alistar. You're not going to see consistent blind Alistars, and I mean, if you have it within your champion pool, you're very comfortable with the pick, then you can play it. If you've never played Gragas before, though, it's just not worth learning it for that one matchup interaction. Renata sits within the C tier. She's pretty gate kept by Kalista now, but Kalista's kind of been pushed out of competitive, less popular and competitive. I still think she'll see competitive play, even though she's been pretty heavily nerfed at this point. Renata might be able to find her footing again within solo queue. She's unpopular. She's just not very performant. She had been in the past, like back along there were performant Renata variations with like the lockets and the redemptions. But even on the same kind of course, she just isn't doing as well at the moment. I think if you can selectively play her with certain picks and get some value out of her, and she definitely performs better in competitive and controlled environments, but just for average solo queue, not a pick I really recommend at the moment. Mel. So Mel's really funny. This champion obviously is pretty hindered by the fact that people are Q-maxing traditionally. I believe on mid lane, it's like it was like 87 to 8 or something. Oh, 80, I think it was 89 to 8 on mid lane, and it was like 87 to 6 on support. I mean, I think ADC had like the most Emax Mel players. Like, I think that was in the double digits then. I think it was like 13-14% of Mel ADC players were playing Emax, which is really interesting to see. It's like which like role is adapting to what is just her correct variation at the moment. I think Riot are going to have to fix it. I don't think people are going to move over unless they very clearly state Mel Emax is just the best way to play this champion, which they haven't done as of the moment. And there have been people making videos on it. I believe Nemesis made a video on it a long time ago about like the strength of Emax Mel. So it's, yeah, the pick's deflated. Like, ignore the win rate for a champion like Mel. She should probably be like 2% win rate higher, just off like correct skill max. Even then, she's just not in an incredibly performance support. I think you can use her as a counter pick in like the B tier. Does have decent damage. So I think there are like spaces to play her. So actually, yeah, B tier option. But because people max are just wrong at the moment, they are just losing like strength from the champion. So I do have her in the C tier at the moment. Silas is a counter pick. I don't like Silas support that much at the moment. I think when they took away some of his burst potential and pushed him more towards some of those bruiser-esque builds, it definitely devalued him in other roles because he's just not as snowbally. So like his gold scaling roles, like the both jungle and support, definitely suffered. Right now, I think you can play him if you're very comfortable on him. I wouldn't learn him for support, definitely not. Yeah, just be very selective on where you play him. I wouldn't really recommend him just in general though at the moment. I think he does sit in the C tier, so unless you like use him as like a flex option maybe. Moving on to the B tier then. This is the second time Annie support, at least in recent memory, has picked up traction and then pretty quickly lost the traction she picked up. I don't think she'll stick. I think support players just don't really want to play Annie because her play rate just pretty quickly diminishes when she just isn't like blatantly overtuned in like a different role. Like, she received the recent set of nerfs, and yeah, her support pick rate really dropped because of it, and it is declining still. So Annie support, it's fine at the moment. It's not like it's like absurdly strong either. Like, it's a pick which you can lean into if you want to play it and you already have played it before. I wouldn't recommend it because I do think she is just progressively dropping out of like the support popularity pool. That being said though, like, having a niche option is always good, but if it's not blatantly strong, then it's just not as probably good as an option to have within your pool. Tom Kench has just really suffered from like nerfs back along. He sits towards the end of the B tier for a pretty easy to play champion, which is like built kind of from mid to low elo at this point, because that's what Riot wanted to shape him as, because they wanted to get him away from competitive. Like, I mean, everyone remembers the time, I say everyone, most people remember the Tom Kench of the past, or like the old Tom Kench where you just eat your ADC and you just play as like an eat bot. These days, yeah, he has a lot more like what's the word I'm looking for? Selfish tools. Like, he does a lot more damage. He's a lot more self-sufficient, and it's benefited him for solo queue, but he's also in a pretty dire spot at the moment. Yumi sits within the B tier. I was wondering if she would end up dropping all the way down to the C tier with her nerfs not too long ago. Like, they did one set of nerfs and then they followed it up with another set to her ultimate. I was wondering if she would maintain a spot within the B tier, and she has. I think she is fine here now. Zoe being buffed this patch really helped her, so definitely probably more towards the mid to high end of the B tier now even. And yeah, Zeri's a really good marksman at the moment. If you are playing Yuumi and you're druid with a Zeri, that's probably one of the strongest spots to play her. Don't blind Yuumi. Don't default on this champion, though. You can't. It does require specific duos. And if your ADC doesn't want to play with it, you shouldn't play it. Like, you've got to understand that people, if people are not wanting to play with something, they will even if you know it's good, they'll often lower the quality of their gameplay because they're either frustrated or annoyed. And maybe you're petty and you just want to do it anyway, but if you want to legitimately climb, then you should probably look towards playing other options. It's just a smart way about going with things. So don't default on this champion. I think you can selectively play it, and I think she's in a good spot for your Lucians, for example. Like Lucian Yuumi at this point is a pretty well known good duo, but Zeri Yuumi is just a good default one, which you can opt into if your ADC is comfortable playing it. So something to be aware of, but yeah, Yuumi definitely doing a bit better, sits towards the mid to high end of the B tier. Teemo support. It's not bad. It looks troll, obviously. I mean, whenever anyone sees Teemo outside of jungle top, most people usually think he's trolling. But it's fine as an option here. It has good scaling. The blind's really obnoxious for certain ADCs and ADC pairings. The shrooms can be really valuable against certain compositions which just don't have the tools to deal with the control that he can have over objectives. Another pick which, if your ADC doesn't want to play with it, don't put them through it, but can be paid as an option within your pool. I wouldn't recommend learning him for support, but if you're auto-filled and you know it can work, or if you know the limits of your champion, then it can work as an option here. Brand sits within the B tier. He's pretty neglected at the moment. I do think he should probably be a main staple A tier option. Right now, though, he's under the bar, sits as a B tier option. He has more agency. That's the selling point of the champion. Over other picks, you have more individual carry potential, but it's just not enough to really merit him as an option. Hui is fine. He's an okay support option. Just a lot of tools within his arsenal. He's quite hard to pilot, though, if you don't already play Hui. He's not a pick that I recommend at the moment. Nidalee, I contemplated dropping her down to the C tier this patch. I really looked at the data, and it's Moonstone is now being built more when it was the more performant option from last patch, and is now the underperformant option. Echoes is now back to being the more performant option on relatively similar sample sizes. I think you probably need to opt into one or the other. I mean, it probably looks like Echoes is just the better, more consistent option, but Moonstone can be opted into first in the right spots. That being said, though, Nidalee's a really hard champion to play. If you can't play Nidalee well, then you are mostly just a heal bot, which is what this kind of pick wants to be in the support role, but you need to get more out of the champion. You need to be a lane bully on top of that. You need to be able to pilot this pick well, get some damage down. Otherwise, you will feel pretty lackluster and just be better off playing a normal enchanter like your Sorakas or your Sonas, for example. I'm going to leave her within the beta at the moment because I think even with the buffs this patch and the buffs next patch, she'll probably stay around here. But she is definitely a harder to pilot option than some of the other picks in this tier list. And it might be a case of that. And if you don't already play it, then it's probably just not worth picking it up. Blitzcrank sits within the B tier, a solid hook champion. He's just a bit under the bar at the moment compared to some of the other options. He is just his hook in his current state, which can be all he needs to be. Run around hooker champion, can be a good win con for games, but if you pick him in every game, he does become quite a bit less valuable because he does require more selective picking than maybe something like a Nautilus, for example. Seraphine is just fine for support. She's not been amazing for a while now. She definitely sits towards the lower end of the B tier at the moment, but if you're very comfortable playing her and you pair her alongside something like an Ashe, she can definitely increase in value. Something like a Senna is within the B tier as well at the moment. She's just not a pick I really recommend. The changes she received in this patch were obviously ADC skewed, but have some level of support power loss if you do end up having to last hit a minion. For the other set of changes, they also weren't good for support Senna. She has just been in a weaker state since then, and it's just a pick I don't really recommend opting into unless you are looking for something with a bit more agency, AD, and can opt into some slightly more offensive builds if needed. That being said, I still recommend Pantheon over her if you're looking for an AD option. I think Pantheon supports in a pretty solid spot at the moment. Swain sits within the B tier. He is a good low elo counterpick option. I don't recommend playing him higher up you go. I also don't recommend just defaulting on the champion, albeit Swain is mostly just one-tricked when played support. He's in a pretty unfortunate spot. Swain's kit, no matter what they've done with him, has just never really been great for support. Like, he's always been a better bot laner or a better mid laner. Right now, he's good bot lane, he's good mid lane. You can play him support, he can work. He's a good counter pick option, just don't default on him. He will definitely struggle in quite a few games and feel pretty lackluster if played in those wrong spots. Zac sits within the beta, same reason for Galio as well. I just pair these two champions together. They just don't have great itemization and they suffer from it. You can opt into like your lockets and stuff, but they want to go in, they want like amplifiers and stuff, and it's just not really there for them at the moment. So unless you're very comfortable playing them, I just don't really recommend them as much support. Like, you can use them as like flex picks. Xerath, Lux are some of the higher damage options within the beta. In the case of in the case of both, honestly, like Horizon Focus just not being like it's getting close to being as good as it was before they like changed the item, but it's still not quite there. Like, Xerath is still a slightly weaker champion. He preferred the damage amp over the cheaper cost and the haste on the new variant. That being said, though, you can opt into Shadow Flame. We've seen like different variations of Xerath. I still think the champion's good, especially if you pilot it well. And the same goes for Lux. She has great burst potential. You just need to give these champions a lot of gold, otherwise they'll feel quite lackluster compared to some of the other options. And I recommend Vel'Koz over these two if you're looking for like an artillery option. Morgana and Fiddle wrap up the beta, or like the remaining beta options. In the case of Morgana, she's doing better for mid-elo. I don't like Morgana. I think this kit has clear issues, but if you're very comfortable on the champion, you pick it in spots where you feel like you can get good value out of it. Like, maybe you've set up for your snare, maybe Murktrid's value is just not very high on the enemy team, and you know that, yeah, like the long CC on Q can be quite impactful. Maybe you can get good Black Shield value, or your ultimate is pretty good for like getting like you can consistently get your ultimate off within the game. Then there are like arguments for where you can play Morgana. That being said, though, her kit's it's a bit all over the place, and outside of like some of those like your Caitlyn pairings, for example, I just don't really recommend her as much as some of the other options. But there's no doubt that she definitely performs better in mid to low elo, and I have her in the high B tier for that at the moment. The other pick is Fiddle. Fiddle could easily like claw back into the A tier. I think the champion has definitely settled after its nerfs as being a solid B2 option, but the buffs going into 25.13 will definitely push it back up as an A2 option. He's going to have access to more damage on the W, and that will be meaningful for him. So Fiddle, I would recommend picking him back up again, especially if you already had some time into Fiddlesticks. It can be like a pretty solid champion to opt into. Dropping down from the A to the B tier then are Neeko and Shen. In the case of Shen, he's still a high B tier option. The nerf towards his E was meaningful, though. He has lost some burst potential, and Shen wants to opt into a lot of HP, so yeah, that is going to gradually increase more and more throughout the game. That being said, though, I still think he's a great counter pick option. As long as you just use him as a counter pick option, I still think he maintains a lot of his value within the support role. He's just a bit weaker of a champion. Neeko is just a hard champion to pilot. She is one of the hardest supports to play, reliant on like being very oppressive early on to the game, and then translating that advantage into like your mid to late game. You traditionally want to play her into like some of those like melee options if you can like consistently punish like Brahms, for example. That can be a value of the pick. The other thing with the champion is the fact that the nerfs this patch were pretty impactful, and you need to play the W correctly. Like, if you don't utilize the W effectively on this champion, you are losing a huge amount of kit value, and I would recommend just playing a different champion. But if you've sunk a lot of time into Neeko, she is still one of the best support options in the game. She's just, I'd say, a bit too hard for like the average elo player, and that's why her pick rate just isn't very high here. Like, Neeko mid and Neeko support before the changes, after the changes, has just never really been that popular of a champion, and that does oftentimes lead to the fact that she's elite skewed, competitively skewed, and just not that, like, her W's just got a lot of unintuitive mechanics, or intuitive if you like. I mean, that can just be opinionated, but it's the depth of knowledge of the W is just a really big skill test. Like, knowing how to extend the duration of it, or like how to like manipulate it on just like loads of different environments can be really important for this champion. Anyway, I'm rambling. Moving on to the A tier, then we lead off with Rakan. I've bumped him back up. I think this champion has good spots, and he's a very good just to have within your pool as support. Like, I do recommend everyone has at least played some level of Rakan. He has really good engage potential. He's good team fighting. His tools are just very powerful within his kit, and his Q's a legitimate ability these days. So Rakan, I think he definitely gets to promote back up into the A tier. Pantheon is a good AD A tier option. He requires good aggression early onto the game, but he's pretty simple, pretty intuitive on like how you want to operate him. He's a good flex pick option. He's not being nerfed for MSI for his jungle power, which is very surprising. And I'd say he maintains his spot within the A tier. So Pantheon, definitely my recommended like A tier option. I've missed Pyke. I should have probably talked about Pyke. Pyke is an incredibly elite SKU champion. Like if you can play Pyke well, he's one of the best supports within the game. If you can't play Pyke well, he is really, really not worth playing. Like he is just a very hard to get value out of champion. Like you need to be very oppressive early on to the game, snowball those advantages, take over the map, and like use your mobility, and that can definitely be challenging. Like most people who play Pyke, like performant on Pyke, are just OTPs of the champion because he just requires a lot of depth of the pick. Within the A tier, we also have Karma, who's mostly just playing the 3-point Q into Emax, Moonstone, Echoes of Helia build at the moment, I believe it is. And she's performant on it. I think the champion's in a pretty solid spot at the moment. A great A tier option, especially if you're looking for like a shielding kind of support option within the game. And enemy team can't really opt into Serpent's Fang. LeBlanc got buffed this patch. She's doing quite well. She was already a good support option, and I will still continue to recommend her as a support option. She's just a bit easier to pilot within this role, and you mostly just focus on like executing your combos correctly, put some time into her, and I think she's quite a rewarding support at the moment. Zoe, also within the the more higher agency support options, where if you give them gold, they can be really valuable and you can take over games with this pick. So Zoe, I also think is in a great spot at the moment, a great A tier support option. Some of your more niche options include the likes of Shaco, who has been pretty performant in the support role for a while now. If you pick AP Shaco in the right spots where the enemy just doesn't have the tools to deal with your boxes, he can be a really, really good pick. He's very hard to play, which is like the main kind of argument against recommending Shaco, but if you put the time into him, I will still recommend him as an option. If you have him, he's less recommendable, but you do want to put some time into him, and yeah, he will be good to go. Zilean, I think in compositions where you can really utilize the power of his movement speed up, I think this pick is incredibly valuable. Just as a standalone champion, he's also in a pretty good spot at the moment, so deserving of an A tier option. But pair him with easy one to take is the Lost Ratones example, where pair him with a Kindred, and the movement speed value of that champion can be really high. Obviously, it was played mid then, but Zilean has that flexibility. Like you can play him mid, you can play him support. I think he's in a pretty good spot at the moment. Some of your other damage options include the likes of Zyra and Vel'Koz. I think these are picks with good agency. Vel'Koz, obviously, his upfront burst with the buffs he received not too long ago, and the shorter CD ultimate did wonders for him, and he's been performing ever since. In the case of Zyra, she's a bit more mid to low elo skewed. Her damage tends to be people will be more aware and apparent of how to play around Zyra the higher up you go. But in mid to low elo, you can just have plants which just stay up on in fights for a long time and can just print lots of damage for you, which can be really valuable. She also has a pretty valuable snare that can be quite a good tool, and I think her general damage at the moment is in a pretty solid spot. So Zyra, recommendable A tier option. Maokai, pretty simple, good counterpick champion. I don't recommend blinding him in every game, but he's in a pretty good spot. He's his simplicity is very, very clear. Run Trailblaze from this champion, and you should be in a pretty good spot in most games. Soraka, pretty good standard enchanter option if you're looking for a champion which can dish out a lot of heals, and you can pair it alongside a good ADC option, something like an Ashe, for example. She can be very, very good. Milio, also in a pretty good spot at the moment. I think he's actually one of the highest win rate supports in the game, which has always been interesting to see because obviously, I think to an extent he is pretty mid to low elo skewed, but he's also traditionally quite pairing reliant. You want to pair him with champions which benefit from W or can utilize the tools he outputs. But right now, I think his numbers are just very high, and he's a very good generic support option to have within your pool. If you also need a champion which is good for cleansing sleeps, for example, I think Milio can be quite good in those environments. Some of your traditional options include the Nautiluses, the Leonas, the Alistars at the moment. I think all these picks are in really good spots. They've been buffed not too long ago. In the case of Nautilus, it was Q damage. Leona had her mana cost and her passive buffed. And Alistar, I had like his kit reshaped like a while ago, but has been kind of riding higher for that ever since. Like Alistar is going to be one of the highest priority champions going into MSI, and that's why you will see like your Gragas's and your Poppies be quite apparent. I imagine over the duration of the tournament, but they're all great solo queue options, and I really do just recommend opting into them if you feel very comfortable on them. I think Leona's the easiest of the three, but they can all be really valuable in the right situations. Bard got 5 movement to buff this patch, and that is very big for Bard. Don't sleep on it. He's more mobile around the map, and for a champion, I mean, he is probably one of the biggest winners of map mobility. Like, you want to be able to collect your chimes, you want to be able to find angles onto different lanes, like utilize for charges on your chimes, and then you can move around the map again. Good champion in his current state. He's hard to pilot though. That is the main thing which you've got to be aware of. Bard is not a champion you can first time and expect to get good results on. You need to be able to correctly use this pick, otherwise you'll end up trolling fights, and that is something you want to avoid. So put some time into him. Make sure you're utilizing the ultimate correctly, whether that's like blocking Rift from like charging into your towers, or utilizing it to set up plays for your team. I think those can all be very valuable aspects of the champion. Fresh has been in a pretty good spot for a while now. Like, he's not quite an S tier option. I think he sits as more like a solid mid to high end A tier pick in his current state. The move and just push towards like hyper carries definitely is going to benefit him. Like, Aphelios being buffed this patch was one of the traditional good pairings with him. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him at MSI with nerfs towards things like Callista. That is going to be a really big benefit for this champion. So Fresh, I think he's in a good spot at the moment, definitely deserving of an A tier placement. Some of the other good counter picks include the likes of Poppy and Tarek. I think both these champions, if you play them in the right situations, can be really, really powerful. Tarek has some certain specific pairings where he really dominates, like Nyla, for example. Tarek Nyla is like a very traditional strong pairing. Poppy definitely deserving of a high A tier spot as well. I believe she will definitely see play, especially at MSI, into these heavy dive compositions. We even saw Carrier play it against, I believe, HLE in the the final promotion for MSI match, and that was a really good game to watch. Like, he got some really, really big value ultimates off, which can be really big game deciders. So Poppy, I think she's in a great spot for support at the moment, definitely deserving of an A tier position. Gonna drop Elise down. She's still really good. I still really recommend her as a pick. She's just not the nerfs she received, the 5% MP ratio on her spider form, were just enough to kind of push her down to the A tier. But if you're very comfortable on her, you understand her burst and lethal thresholds, she can be an incredibly impressive pick early onto the game. Obviously, the meme with Elise, though, is the fact that she does fall off incredibly aggressively, and she can look really useless later onto the game, especially if you don't pilot the pick well. So that is something just to be cognitive of. You need to be able to get early game advantages. If you're not comfortable doing that, then I would recommend other picks within the roster. Lulu, even after all of her nerfs, still in a great spot at the moment. Great enchanter option. Just requires better more specific pairings. If you pair her with champions which just don't really want to be paired alongside Lulu, like MFs for example, she'll suffer from it. But if you pair her with a Jinx or an Ashe or a Zeri, she can be a really good support option still at the moment. Sona really benefited from her Q buffs not too long ago. I do recommend this champion in the right spots. If you play her just generically, she will suffer against certain champions, so don't be a one trick. But if you are very comfortable playing her just as a counter pick option into certain matchups where you just can't be punished, you can play around your mid game, whether you're playing 3 points Q, 5 point Q max, or you're just playing W max. There's different ways of playing Sona, and it comes down to usually personal preference at this point. Ever since those Q buffs, she has definitely been in a more a flexible kind of state, and I like Sona. I think this champion could be a really great option. But yeah, she does suffer, and once again, it's kind of like some of your options. If your ADC doesn't feel comfortable playing with a Sona, then you shouldn't play Sona, because they just won't play to probably that optimal kind of standard, unless obviously you are a one trick. I mean, you don't really have much choice, but you probably shouldn't be a one trick. That is an issue with some of these enchantress supports. They will just have spots where they really struggle, but they're great counter pick options for the most part. Janna, for example, I think this pick can be incredible as a counter pick, and paired alongside champions which really benefit from her AD steroid can be the main selling point of this champion. But her self-build tools are incredibly valuable, and she can work really nicely into dive. That is something which I think Janna is really excelling at in her current state. Nami, she's always sat here. I think Riot are comfortable with her leading the charge for some of these kind of enchanter betters. She doesn't usually take over competitive. She is considered pretty balanced for solo queue. Most people actually I know a lot of people who just don't like Nami, think Nami's a really bad champion, but I know a lot of people who really value Nami. Like the EU can be a really powerful ability. The setup with the ultimate on the Q can also be really powerful. Just for generic like buffs and like the playstyle of the champion has pretty clear patterns, and it can be really valuable in the right spots. Pair it alongside like your Jins and like even your Dravens and stuff. We've seen like value through that, but like Lucian obviously is the standard one. I think the pick's in a pretty good spot at the moment. My 2 recommended like melee kind of like a warden supports, if you want to call them that, or like engage supports. I mean, Braum as like a counter pick, incredible champion at the moment. You have to play him as a counter pick though. Blind Braum loses to enchanters, and that's where like Sona, for example, can be a really valuable option. In the case of Rel, she is probably the number 1 generic engage support at the moment. I recommend just defaulting on Rel if you play her. If you don't, then probably Leona is your next best option. But if you play, well, yeah, number 1 champion in my eyes at the moment. I really do recommend just having her within your pool, and just as a pick you can bring out in most games and get value out of her. Her setup, her tools are just very valuable in the current state of the game, and she's just been left in a pretty generically strong state for a while now. So I think I'm like happy with her current state. Those are my thoughts. Yeah, make sure you're playing like a lot of the like either enchanters or your Brahms and stuff as counter picks, like your Tareks and your Poppies, for example. If you're looking for something a bit more generic, then I think like your Rails, your Leonas, your Nautiluses, your Ali's are already good. And for your agency supports, I think LeBlanc's really been quite performant for a while. Your Elise is still good. Your Zoe's are still good. And I think there's just a lot of flexibility in what you can do with the high end of the tier list. Even then, though, there's a lot of like one-trickable champions within the B and C tier, which can be really valuable if you play them in the right spots. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.